The throne room was still warm with the echo of her name, and Caliph Voss, Alpha King of the Blackthorn Dominion, realized the silence had changed. Not the silence of obedience, not the silence of fear, the silence of absence. He stood from the carved wolf throne so fast the oak groaned beneath him, his golden eyes cutting through the firelit hall like blades. 14 advisors, 6 sentries, 3 foreign ambassadors waiting for ink on treaties that would reshape the northern territories for generations. None of them.
Where is she?
His voice did not rise. It dropped, low, territorial, vibrating with something that made every wolf in the room bare their throat on instinct. Lord Caspian, his senior beater, was the only one who dared meet his gaze. The Omega girl. She was escorted from the hall after the tribunal's decision, Your Majesty. Lady Sinara's petition was granted. The court ruled her presence unfit. Unfit. Calith's paw split through the skin of his fingertips before he registered the shift. Black talons clicked against the armrest of his throne, and the sound was enough to make Ambassador Reinhold from the Silver Fang sovereignty take one full step backward.
Who granted that petition?
The tribunal voted while you were in the Western War Chamber. Lady Sinara presented testimony from 3 ranking wolves that the girl had no bloodline claim, no shifting ability, and no formal standing to remain in the king's court. The vote was unanimous. Unanimous. While he had been reviewing troop positions for a border skirmish that suddenly felt like the smallest thing in the world, Sinara had moved. Quietly, precisely, like a blade slipped between ribs while the body was turned. And Era, the woman whose touch had made his dead hands feel warm for the first time in 300 years, had been cast out of his fortress like discarded fur. How long ago? 4 hours, my king. 4 hours. On foot, in the dark, with nothing. Caliph looked at the 3 treaty documents spread across the great table. The Silver Fang Trade Alliance, the Iron Moor Defense Pact, the Ashvale Territorial Concession. 3 kingdoms, months of negotiation, the political architecture of the entire Northern Front. He walked past the crowd. Your Majesty, Ambassador Reinhold began, his voice careful, diplomatic. The signing was scheduled for tonight. Our Alpha has traveled 11 days to... Then he will travel 11 days back. The words landed like a door slamming shut. Caliph did not slow. He crossed the great hall in strides that were too long, too fast, not entirely human. The fire in the central pit guttered as he passed, as if the flames themselves flinched. Lord Caspian followed, boots sharp against stone. My king, if you leave now, if you abandon 3 alliances without explanation, the political cost will be... Tell me something, Caspian. Caliph stopped at the fortress gate, and when he turned, his eyes were no longer gold. They were molten, bright and clear, the pupils narrowed to slits. In 300 years, has the cold in my chest ever receded? Has the frost that climbs my bones every night ever slowed? Has any healer, any witch, any blood oath made me feel anything at all? Caspian said nothing. She did. 2 words, and they carried the weight of centuries. Saddle nothing. I go on foot. Caliph shed his crown, literally lifted the iron circlet from his head and set it on the stone ledge of the gate arch, where it sat like an abandoned thing. If the ambassadors leave, they leave. If Sinara speaks before I return, put her in the tower. And if the tribunal protests, then remind them who built this tribunal, and who can unmake it before breakfast. He shifted mid-stride, not fully, not the enormous black wolf that had once torn through an entire enemy war camp, but enough. His shoulders broadened, his spine curved. His senses exploded outward, pine, wet earth, frost, stone, smoke, and underneath it all, faint as a single thread of spider silk in cathedral, the scent of wild sage and rain-washed linen. Her scent. He ran. Era Dunham had told herself she would not cry, and she hadn't. She had told herself she would not look back at the fortress, and she hadn't done that either, though the temptation had pressed against the back of her skull like a thumb against the bulldoze. She had told herself, as she climbed the rocky forest trail with a single pack slung over one shoulder and her thin cloak already damp from the mist, that this was familiar. This was the shape her life had always taken. Arrival, brief belonging, then expulsion. The only variable was how long the middle part lasted. 3 weeks this time. That was generous, really. 3 weeks since the Alpha King's war riders had come to her village, to the pack that had never claimed her, that had kept her as a servant since her mother's death when she was 9, that had let Lord Rennick's sons use her as a training target when they needed something fragile to practice their cruelty on. 3 weeks since Caliph Voss himself had walked through the door of Rennick's home, supposedly on a border inspection, and stopped. Just stopped. Mid-sentence, mid-stride, his golden eyes had locked onto hers across a crowded room, and every wolf present had felt the air change, like the moment before lightning strikes, like the forest holding its breath before a predator moves. She had been carrying a water pitcher. She remembered that because she had not dropped it. Everyone always marveled at the wrong things. They marveled that the king had noticed her, that his wolf had reacted, that he had growled when Brennick's eldest son grabbed her arm to pull her out of the way. But Era's private pride was secret. She had not dropped the pitcher. She had not flinched either, not when the most powerful eye crossed the room toward her with an expression that looked like a man who had just been struck. Not when he spoke her name, which he should not have known, and his voice broke with a second syllable. "You are coming with me," he had said. Not a question, not a request, a fact delivered with the certainty of gravity. And she had gone, because his hand, when it closed around hers, was cold. So cold it should have hurt, cold like gripping iron in deep winter. And something in her had understood that the cold was not natural, that it was a wound, that he had been freezing from the inside for longer than she had been alive. She had gone because nobody had ever looked at her like she was the answer to something. 3 weeks in his fortress. 3 weeks of meals she was not accustomed to finishing, of a room with a door that locked from the inside, of the king's golden eyes following her through every hallway and across every hall. 3 weeks of Lady Sonara's whispered campaign. The former Luna candidate, the high-born daughter of a southern alpha, the woman who had been promised the position at Caleb's side, and who looked at Era the way a cat looks at something it intends to kill with a sword. And then, this morning, the tribunal. Sonara's petition, the rule, the guards at her door, polite, the single pack they allowed her to fill. "The court thanks you for your time," the senior guard had said, and Era had nearly laughed, because it was such a perfectly constructed cruelty, to thank someone for the thing you were taking from them. Now she walked. The mist thickened around her, and the trail narrowed, and the temperature dropped in a way that had nothing to do with altitude. She was perhaps 2 leagues from the fortress when she heard, not footsteps, something alone, a vibration in the earth itself, as if the mountain had a heartbeat. It was quickening. The trees around her creaked, not from wind, but from something passing too fast for wind. And then his voice, raw and ragged, and stripped of every royal formality she had ever heard him use. "Era." She stopped. She did not turn around. Her hands tightened on the strap of her pack. She stared straight ahead at the dark trail, and she said, very quietly, as if the curse knew she was leaving and was rushing to fill the space she had ruined. Turn around. The sound came from his chest. Not a growl, not quite. Something more broken than that. Like a door being forced open after centuries of rust. Hero. Please. She had never heard an Alpha King say please. She suspected no one had in the entire history of his bloodline. The word sounded foreign in his mouth, like a language he was learning in real time. She turned. He looked. Devastated. That was the only word. The iron composure, the predatory stillness, the untouchable authority, all of it was gone. What stood before her on the dark forest trail was a man. Just a man. His golden eyes were too bright, and his breath came in clouds of frost that crystallized and fell like tiny broken stars. And his hands, those powerful, cursed hands that could crush stone, were shaking. 300 years. 300 years of ice. Of feeling nothing, of watching the world move, and knowing I was already dead inside it. And then me. I poured water into clear in my hall that smelled like smoke and dog. And I woke up. After 3 centuries, I woke up and said one word. His voice fractured. Hera's chest ached. She could feel it. The bond. Pulling at her like a rope tied around her ribs. Pulling her toward him with a force that had nothing to do with choice, and everything to do with something older than choice. Your court does not want me, she said. Your tribunal ruled me unfit. I have no bloodline, no dignity, no standing. I am an Omega who cannot shift, and your kingdom needs a leader who can stand beside you without making you move. Finish that sentence and I will lose what remains of my composure. His eyes blazed. The gold was overtaken by something deeper, amber, then copper, then a burning bronze that was not human at all. His wolf was right there, pressing against the surface, and Era could see the physical effort it took him to hold the shift back. Do you know what I did when I discovered you were gone? He asked, and his voice was low, dangerous, intimate. I left 3 unsigned treaties on the table, 3 alliances, the Silver Fang, the Iron Knot, the Ash Veil, months of negotiation. My beater told me the political cost would be catastrophic. Do you know what I said? Nothing. I said nothing. I walked out. Because politics is the architecture of a kingdom, but you are the reason the kingdom has a king who is still breathing. If you're feeling this story tonight, leave a like so I know to bring you more like this one. The frost on his skin was spreading. She could see it now. Crystalline patterns climbing his forearms, tracing his veins like white fire. The curse was accelerating, feeding on the distance between them, on the raw vulnerability of this moment. You're getting nervous, she whispered. Yes. Because of me. Because you let yourself. Because I let myself feel. Yes. The curse was designed that way, by someone I trusted. His jaw tightened. Sinara's mother, the witch, Vaylin. She bound the curse to hope itself. The moment I allowed myself to want something, truly want it, the ice would consume me entirely. It was her insurance. Her daughter would be living. No one would live. The words landed like stones dropped into still water. Era stared at me. Sinara knows. Sinara orchestrated it. The tribunal, the vote, your removal. It was never about bloodline or standing. It was about making sure I never got through it long enough for it to matter. Era felt something shift inside her. Not the wolf she had never been able to become, but something else, something older, a heat that started in her chest and radiated outward, steady and fierce, like coal that had been banked for years and finally given air. "Take me back," she said. Caleb blinked. "What?" "Take me back to your fortress. Take me back to your call. And when we arrive, I want Lady Sonara's sword to pray upon." "Hera, she used your curse as a leash. She used your pain as a political tool. And she looked me in the eye this morning when the guards came, and she smiled." Hera's voice was steady, quiet, absolutely immovable. "I am not a woman. I am not hiding. I cannot shift. But I will stand in your hall, and I will look at every wolf who voted to cast me out, and I will not flinch. I've been doing that my entire life. I am exceptionally active." Something happened to Caleb's face. The devastation cracked, and underneath centuries of ice and control and frozen silence, there was a smile. Small, broken. He said softly. "Good. You could use some terror that doesn't come from the curse." He reached for her hand. She let him take it. His fingers were so cold they burned, and she could feel the frost trying to climb from his skin to hers. But where their hands met, the ice stopped. Not melted, stopped. As if her wall was a wall it could not cross. They both looked down at the place where fire met frost. "That has never happened before," Caleb said. "I know," Hera replied. "Take me home." The great hall was full when they arrived. Caspian had done his work. Every ranking member of the court, every tribunal elder, and every foreign ambassador who had not yet departed was assembled. Torches burned in iron sconces along the walls, and the central fire pit cast long shadows across the stone floor. Lady Sonara stood near the front, dressed in midnight blue, her silver hair immaculate, her expression the careful blankness of someone who had already calculated every outcome and found them all favorable. That expression changed when Caleb walked through the doors with Hera beside him. Not behind him, beside him, his hand on the small of her back, his wolf-bright eyes daring anyone who would respect. "Lady Sonara," Caleb said, and his voice filled the hall the way thunder fills a mountain. "You petitioned my tribunal to remove a woman from my court on grounds of insufficient standing. I acted within pact law, Your Majesty." Sonara's voice was smooth, practiced. "The tribunal agreed." "The tribunal was deceived, as was I, for 300 years." A murmur rippled through the hall. Caleb released Hera and stepped forward, and with each step, the temperature in the room dropped. Frost bloomed across the stone floor. Not from the curse this time, but from the sheer force of an alpha's fury held on leash. "Your mother, the witch Faith, bound my curse to hold. You knew it. You maintained it. Every healer who came to examine me, every remedy that failed, you ensured they failed. Because my suffering was your ladder." Sonara's mask cracked. Just a fraction, a flicker of something in her pale eyes. "You have no proof. I have the bond." Caleb's voice was quiet, and the quiet was worse than pain. "When Hera touches me, the ice stops. Not retreats, stops. As if it recognizes something your mother's magic cannot overcome. No healer has ever achieved that. No remedy, no ritual, no blood magic. An Omega with no wolf, no bloodline touches my hand. And 3 centuries of darkness visible. He turned to the court. "That is not coincidence. That is a fated bond so powerful it overrides a generational curse. And Lady Sonara, because if I ever found my true mate, her mother's proof. Sonara stepped backward. human Era had ever seen her. "Guards," Caleb said. "Tower, until I decide what 3 centuries of treason costs." They took her. She did not scream or fight. She walked with rigid dignity, her chin high, but as she passed Era, their eyes met. Era said nothing. She did not need to. The silence said everything the court needed to hear. Then Caleb turned to Era, and in front of the entire court, every elder, every ambassador, every wolf who had whispered Omega and unfit and unworthy, he knelt. An alpha king on his knees. The hall went so silent that the crackle of the fire pit sounded like cannon shots. "I cannot offer you a court that has earned your trust," he said. "I cannot offer you a kingdom that treated you with the dignity you deserve. I can only offer you this, that every day you remain, I will make this place worthy of you, not the other way around." Era looked down at the most powerful wolf alive, kneeling on cold stone, with frost still climbing his veins, and his golden eyes raw with something that looked like terrified hope. She placed her hand on his cheek. The frost shattered. Not slowly, not gradually. It shattered, like glass, like ice struck by a bell's toe. A sound that rang through the hall and made every wolf present gasp. The crystalline patterns on his skin fractured and fell away like snow in sunlight, and beneath them his skin was warm, flushed, and alive. Caleb gasped. The sound wrenched from somewhere so deep it might have been 300 years old. His eyes went wide. His hand came up to cover hers, pressing her palm harder against his face, and his fingers were moving. For the first time since the curse had taken root, his fingers were moving. He whispered. Era was crying. She had told herself she wouldn't, and she was, and for the first time in her life, she didn't care. "Then stand up," she said. "Please don't lean." "This one does," he said. "For you. Always for you." He stood. He kissed her. And it was not gentle, not careful, not loyal. It was the kiss of a man who had been drowning in ice for 3 centuries, and finally broken the surface. His arms closed around her, and he lifted her off the ground. The court erupted. Not in polite applause, but in howls. Wolf howls, raw and primal, rising from throats that had never made such a sound for any human to hear. Because she was not what any of them expected. She was what all of them needed. 3 months later, the garden bloomed. It had been dead for as long as anyone could remember. The interior courtyard of the Blackthorn Fortress, where nothing had grown since the curse took hold. Bare soil, grey stone, frost that never fully melted in a dry summer. Now there were roses, wild ones, untamed, climbing the stone walls in explosions of crimson and white. Herbs grew in neat rows, sage and lavender and thyme, planted by the woman's own hands, because Era Voss, Luna of the Blackthorn Dominion, had decided that a queen who could not get dirt under her fingernails was not a queen worth following. The court had changed. Slowly, painfully, the way a frozen river thaws, cracking before it flows. 3 tribunal elders had resigned. 2 had stayed and publicly apologized. Caspiel had become Era's fiercest defender, which surprised everyone except Caleb, who had seen his beater's face the night Era walked back into the fortress with her chin up and her eyes dry. The ambassadors had returned. All 3 treaties were signed. Revived, actually, with better terms, because it turned out that an Alpha King who could feel again negotiated with more precision and less brutality than one running on frozen reflex. Era sat in the garden now, a letter in her hands. The seal was familiar. Lord Rennick's house. The pack that had kept her as a servant, and that had let their sons treat her as practice for cruelty. She opened it. The handwriting was shaky. Rennick himself, an old man's script, stripped of all the bluster she remembered. Your Majesty, it began. Tara paused on those two words for a long time, letting them settle into her bones. It was an apology, a grovelling, thorough, frightened apology. Word had reached every pack in the north about what the Omega Girl had become, about the curse she had shattered, about the king who had abandoned 3 alliances to chase her through the dark. Lord Brennick was terrified. He should be. Era folded the letter carefully. She did not burn it. She did not frame it. She simply placed it in the drawer of her writing desk, beneath her correspondence and her pressed flowers, where it would sit as a quiet record of a world that had learned too late what she had learned. Good news? Caleb's voice came from the doorway. He leaned against the stone frame, arms crossed, golden eyes warm, actually warm. Not the burning intensity of a cursed wolf, but the steady glow of a man at peace. He smiled at her now. It still startled her sometimes, how it transformed his face, the sharp angles softening, the severity giving way to something almost buoyant. Rennick wrote, he said. Ah, a pause. Should I invade? Not today. Tomorrow? I will consider it and provide my ruling. He laughed. A real laugh, the kind that came from the chest and filled the room, and crossed the garden to where she sat. He dropped into a chair beside her, stretched his long legs into the sunlight, now actually reached the courtyard door, and took her hand. Both of them. In the distance, a wolf howled. Not in warning, not in warning, and something that sounded impossible, like the fortress of the Blackthorn Dominion had been cold for 300 years. It was not cold anymore. So tell me, where are you listening from tonight? Drop your answer in the comments. Let me know what part hit you the hardest. And if this story reached you, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. I will see you in the next tale.